I'm sure that we have all heard this phrase, right? You can, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he eats all his life, or he eats forever, that sort of thing, right? And so we as teachers, preachers, and teachers in many other capacities, all kind of, I think, would agree with that statement. That it's one thing to do for others, which again is very important, to have compassion on people. But then it's another thing, though, that if we can actually teach people, work alongside them, that they can feel empowered and that they're not just getting things for free. Oh yeah, I'm not able to do anything. I feel bad about myself because I have to have all this, this help. But instead, if we can empower people themselves to do things, again, we see that all the time, even down at Back Bay Mission. That is their philosophy as well. Is we gladly will be here. We want to do these things for you, but we also want to teach you how it is that you can do for yourself, but then also that you can go out and help others. Well, I've been sharing thoughts from Reverend Kathy McShane at the beginning of almost every sermon. I've kind of read, or at the end, read something from her. And so I'd like to share at the beginning of this sermon a book that she talks about. And it's a book called Legends, Women Who Have Changed the World Through the Eyes of Great Women Writers. And she says, a few weeks ago I discovered on my bookshelf a book I don't remember ever buying or receiving as a gift. So I thought, oh, I do that too sometimes. This book appears and I don't even know where it came from. She says inside the book there are beautifully written tributes to maybe 50 women. I tried to find it at the library, but I couldn't get it. But each of them is accompanied by a photograph, a portrait, really. You'd recognize most of the women's names or pictures: Golda Meir, Eleanor Roosevelt, Harriet Tubman, Anne Frank, Princess Diana, even Twiggy. They are world leaders, artists, athletes, writers, activists. Every one of them is a legend in some way, someone who is remembered because she did something that made her extraordinary, that made her extraordinary or larger than life. And so this is what Kathy shares. She says, it struck me as I leafed through the pages of that book that as much as I might honor these women and their accomplishments, I would never read about them hoping to model my life after theirs. I admire them, but I'd never think about using their lives as a template for my own. What we know about people we call legends is that they have a unique set of gifts, some talent that is extraordinary. They're not like me, and I'm not like them. When their presence is gone, it's irreplaceable. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. At first I kind of was like, kind of negative on that one. But yet each person has these different gifts, and each of us have these different gifts. Maybe we're not in a book, or we're not in the Times, most influential 100 people of the year. But that each one of us really shouldn't be modeling after ourselves, or up after others, but we should be using our gifts and graces. It made me think actually of something else. It's called the Great Man View of History. I don't know if you've ever heard this or not. But it was first suggested by Thomas Carlyle, and I had to look it up because I couldn't remember who had come up with it. But he's a philosopher who lived in the 19th century, and Carlyle believed that the story of civilization is really a biography of the great men who have shaped history. And again, yes, it was just men that he looked at, okay? And through the force of these men's leadership, intellect, beauty, and charisma of their presence. And so he kind of came up with some other names: Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Napoleon, Washington, Aristotle, Albert Einstein, Martin Luther King Jr. And I just thought that was kind of interesting, and I thought, what, our culture has kind of adopted that way of thinking, this great man view of history. And I'm not talking because he only did acknowledge men. I mean just the whole philosophy of that. And here's why. We like people who individually accomplish great things, people who act like heroes, right? All of us do. And sometimes we wait for some bigger than life figure to come and lead us, to fix what's wrong, to overpower all the obstacles with their goodness or their answers to the hardest questions. And then when we discover that these are real people with flaws, then they disappoint us somehow. And then we just keep looking, thinking that that maybe the problem is simply that we made the wrong choice. Maybe there's somebody else who can be like the Messiah of blank, whatever it is, the problem that we're facing. Obviously, we need to be looking at the Messiah also, right? First and foremost. I think we see it in politics too, that we can never find the one candidate who seems to measure up to our sense of what the world needs. And we tend to wait for kind of a hero with our arms crossed. So again, there's that whole dynamic, right, of, well, what is a hero and what is it that is acceptable in leadership and what is not acceptable in leadership? Or is there somebody out there who is really working toward the common good, but there's one thing that happens and then we just go, oh, okay, that I guess they can't save the world for us. But maybe they can, again, if they're working together with other people through their own humanness as well. So it's a fine line of not making excuses for people, that there are certain lines, I'm guessing many of us have, that are no, once this is crossed, no, this is not a person that I want to be fill in the blank, whether it's political, whether it's in charge of the soccer team, whatever it is, in my house. And then others then are ways that we can stop and go, okay, I was looking for this person to take care of everything, but you know what? We all need to be doing this, not just this one person, right? Because sometimes it can kind of make us feel almost powerless, right? If we put our faith in someone and they're not the hero that we thought that they were. And sometimes we kind of, use kind of backward psychology, I'm not sure. If we're not able to change things ourselves, then you know what? Maybe we're not responsible to make the change. Someone else will come along who's greater or more powerful or has all the answers, not just us. This is one of those places where I am quite sure that Jesus intended to turn our expectations upside down. We talk about that all the time, right? How Jesus turned everything upside down. All the expectations of people, we talk about it all the time. Here comes our Messiah. He's going to be riding this huge steed. He's going to have all kinds of weapons and armor, and he's just going to kill all these people that have been bothering us Israelites, and it's all going to work out, right? And yes, it's going to work out, but that's not how Jesus works. And we know, again, think about Palm Sunday, how Jesus comes into it to is his own, is through the humbleness that he has. Jesus didn't have much time for hero worship. He was never captured by other people's expectations about what a Messiah was supposed to be. He was always turning people's focus away from himself. All through the Gospels, you can see that people kept wanting Jesus to capitalize on his power, to be the hero that they needed someone to be, instead of going, oh, that's like worldly power, which is not something that we're supposed to be trying to grab at and hold on to. Oh, I see what you're doing, Jesus. But sometimes we don't see what Jesus is doing, and we just instead put our own human desires on that. Jesus said, he did turn stones into bread. Everybody's saying that to him. I'm sorry. Turn stones into bread. Tell them you're the king. Save yourself, Jesus. Don't die. But Jesus didn't shy away from being the leader that he knew he needed to be, which was a very different way that society and culture told him that they wanted him to be. He used power in a way that no one had seen before. And again, think about all the trials that people were going through with the Romans and the occupying, and they just kept thinking, oh, well, then that's what power is, the Romans. Okay, so now we're going to bring in our own dude who's going to take care of you. And then when Jesus came in, they thought, whoa, our Savior is down here. How does he make us, how is that a Savior? When Jesus led what he came to do, he did with an odd sort of submission and obedience to a larger story, a vision bigger than his own. Am I doing all these things just for me, or am I doing things for others? Am I doing things for the history of others and the continuation of a history of a people? He didn't seek these things for himself, privilege and power. And he didn't back down when other people used their status and privilege to try to make him seem smaller. It was like instead of being intimidated by the power structures around him, he was almost disarming them. And we can do that today, too. We can disarm structures of power, not with more power, but with just a disarming of justice and love and empowerment. So you can see why Jesus didn't choose to, but couldn't be a political leader. Political leadership is always about accumulating and exercising power over things, right? I'm not saying one side or the other in American politics. I'm saying that's just political. That's just what that means. Politics is about giving someone the power of control, right? People, laws, institutions. But Jesus' power was for something different. It was a container that he poured from, if that makes any sense. Compassion, emptying itself again and again for the sake of others, for their healing, for their flourishing. He was empowering people. And he offered his power, to everyone. He literally gave power away, as if there was no reason to hold on to it. Isn't that a very hard concept for us in our day and age to even begin to understand? To give power away as if there's no reason to hold on to it. And it was a continually renewable source, right? And so Jesus says, you give them something to eat. We've read the scripture many times. You go out and heal people, he said. You go and make disciples. If we are going to be change makers, part of mending the world the way Jesus did, our work will be like his, not only to serve people, but to empower them, to set them free, in other words. Change making is using power, the influence that all of us have, not to dominate, but to bless and unburden people. That's the Jesus way, I believe. Change making liberates people by noticing when systems are broken, repairing the ways we've always done things before those ways leave people out or make some people unfree. This is a whole different way of being in the world. And so again, I'm not expecting us to all understand this or grasp this after today or after 2 months, right? But I pray that this is something that we can work with and maybe even wrestle with if we need to, in our lives and the life of this congregation. Change making as a way of Jesus, as a follower of Jesus, is about serving other people. But it does it in a way that encourages not their dependence, which some people like, right? Because if they like power, I want everybody to be dependent on me. But instead to encourage the people's partnerships. So I know some of you have worked with Habitat for Humanity, maybe many times, right? Some of you. But that's the Habitat for Humanity model. For one example, again, Back Bay does the same thing. Habit doesn't just give a family a house. And sometimes I would hear that. Well, I don't know, nothing should be for free. People shouldn't just receive a free house, okay? And I'm not sure even I agree with that. But for those who do feel that way, that's not how Habitat is set up. It asks them to participate in the construction. So every family that receives a house built by Habitat for Humanity has invested 500 hours of sweat equity in it. If not with their own hands, then with the work of their family or their friends. But that's the expectation. So the house will be then theirs. So they don't do it just to teach these people a lesson. They do it so that the people in the home feel like they did something and were partners with everybody else who volunteered to create their home. So they have already have a kind of an already knit together community too by the time they move in. Is it particularly efficient? No. But it does something else that invites people to participate in their own well-being. It enlarges their own sense of meaning and purpose. And it makes everyone a participant in greatness, not just one heroic figure. It's practicing generosity and good intentions with an alternate script, if you will, which is exactly what following Jesus is supposed to be. So if you haven't been to worship these last couple months or whatever, if this is intriguing to you, I would encourage you to watch some of the videos starting from the first Sunday of September. Because we've been talking about different things. I'm just going to mention just a couple, but we talked again about being rooted in compassion, that you're moved to action by someone else's suffering. And maybe some suffering, maybe you don't consider it suffering, or maybe it just doesn't move you. But then there's other suffering that you just can't even barely sleep at night when you hear about. So those are the touch points that maybe you should be focusing on, those things that speak to your heart. We talked about collaboration, that we all do our best work with other people. We talked about creativity as just a couple of other examples, how to use the things that we're holding tight to not live out of scarcity, but to live out of abundance. To make a small, significant difference towards solving a big problem. And then we talked about justice last week. We're talking about empowerment this week. So how does this work for you, or how does this work as a congregation? Well, let me tell you, maybe this puts your mind at ease, like, oh, where's Pastor going with all this? It's not about adding more church programs, okay? So we're not going to add in some more things that we're doing because, okay, yeah, you're not quite busy enough. We're going to add one more thing in, okay? That's not what it's about. It's not about every one of us going out and starting a brand new nonprofit that focuses on a cause that no one's ever thought of before. I mean, that would be okay. But that's not the point. The point is not for us to applaud the heroic work of a few special people. This work is about giving you and all of us a new lens for seeing that we all are powerful enough to change something that is not working well. In your work, at school, the places you lead or you volunteer in your life, in your family, how might those things that you are already doing shift just a little bit? What if your faith makes you a compassion-driven change maker? I just saw like a sign, and it says that you should, and there's a psychology to this, that you should say what you are. Have you ever done this like in journaling or something? So you say, instead of saying, if you're maybe for the New Year's or just any time if you're journaling, I'm really hoping that I will be an athlete, or I'm really hoping I'm going to work so hard that I can be a person who takes care of my health. Just for an example. And then they say that it makes a difference mentally. There's been research on this. If instead you write, I am an athlete. I am a person who takes care of their health, okay? That small little shift in semantics really maybe, though, makes a change in your brain of being, no, I'm a person who does that. Yes, okay. And that you are much more likely to do that. So I want you to think about that. And I'm going to ask for you to echo me. You don't have to, obviously. But what if you would say that to yourself? I am a compassion-driven change maker. So those of you watching from home, if you want to type this in, because we can't hear you, but if you don't mind, if all of you, anybody who wants to, let's just say that together. I'll say it first. I am a compassion-driven change maker. 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 What would your life look like if you would truly believe that and say that to yourself? What if compassion became more and more the lens from which you see things and people around you? Do you see a lot of compassion in the world? Not so much, maybe. Not so much. Now, we do see some, that's right. Ben always sends me these, what's that? It's a Good News Network.
And there's a bunch of videos on YouTube, so there is a lot of compassion, we just don't see it.
There you go. That's right.
It is there, it is there, you just have to look.
Right, and that's exactly true, that sometimes we only see the negatives on the news or hear that on, our social media stream. But yet at the same time, we do see a lot that is not compassion driven, but it definitely is there. So how is it that we can refocus to be able to do that, to be able to deal with things in a compassionate way, to be able to turn things upside down as Jesus did. Shannon Martin, I found another quote from her, which I thought was really interesting. She's the one who wrote that Start With Hello book that we've been using. And this was from her latest blog. But she said, rather than asking bewildered, what can we do in our times right now? Maybe we can shift to, what is my role? And I loved it. Again, it's such a tiny little change. But instead of, what can we do to help people today in the world? Well, wait, what is my role? And then through that role, how can I help others? So she says the answer is not static. It will evolve according to the day, the circumstances, your resources, your capacities. And she continues, we need poets and pastors, healthcare workers, librarians, mothers and fathers. We need builders and breakers. We need prophets and creators. We need people to make us laugh. We need bosses and activists. We need experts in every field doing their work with wisdom and clarity. So we all have those roles, whatever the role is, and again, it's probably more than likely more than one role, right? And we can practice here together in this church when we come together. We can be a sort of a CrossFit gym, shall we say, for each other, practicing the heartfulness of compassion, the discipleship of collaboration, lifting our eyes into creativity, exercising patience to empower each other. You see how these points that we've been talking about all month, these last 2 months, all fit together. But change-making, the kind of change-making that we're about here at Haskins Community Church, isn't about making a better church or more people filling the pews. It's about changing the world. Oh my gosh, Jenny, we're just Haskins. How is that possible? Yes, we're just Haskins, and it's possible. It's not an invitation just to certain people, but to all people. And to you. It's an invitation to people who don't like church, to people who don't yet know anything about church, because we have good news to share. And that's what walking the path of Jesus, I believe, looks like. Jesus came to change things, and we can be the things that Jesus is changing. May it be so.